plenty already, of all of the sessions that we've been recording together with Mike. And if you are interested in the previous sessions, you could go to our WYCKOFF channel and just get those videos from there. And welcome to session number 20.
大家好，这里是罗蒙·博格马佐夫教授。今天呢，是我们微科夫交易研究所的第2次视频。如果你对以前的视频感兴趣的话，你可以到优酷上去看，也可以到咱们的 QQ 群里去看 ，QQ 群里都是全的。
So our plan is to have 3 sessions until about mid or late January. This is when we're gonna start the whole course, and meanwhile, we're gonna be talking about the markets, different markets, during those sessions, and those sessions are gonna be bi-weekly sessions.
罗蒙老师说，他呢，这就现在啊，是给大家的免费的这个公开课。然后呢，这个公开课到什么时候为止呢？到1月份，它正式课程开始为止。那么它的这个公开课呢，将大致是2周1次，如果没有节假日的话。
And today we're gonna be discussing 3 things. Well, we're gonna look at the markets, that's for sure, because we want to understand what's going on. That's number 1. Secondly, we're gonna look at茅台, which is obviously a very popular stock, and as it goes down, we want to understand the structure. And thirdly, we'll look at one of the commodities.
今天呢，我们大家肯定是要看一下，以后我们将讲各种各样的那个，比方说股票啊或期货呀，我们肯定今天要讲一讲市场，因为市场变化非常非常快，非常大，而且呢，我们也要讲一些期货的内容。
All right, well, let's start.
好，我们现在开始。
And actually, we're gonna start with questions.
我们开始呢
Okay,
讲这
so
个，
the
而且
first
我们先从大家提问的东西开始。
Okay, so the first question is, can WYCKOFF method detect stocks which are about to withdraw from the markets? How can we avoid the stocks which are about to withdraw from the market?
第一个问题是一个同学提的，就是微科夫方法能不能够判断即将退市的股票，能不能在这方面进行判断，而且我们如何避免这个退市的股票？
So, usually when you're gonna see a stock having some kind of structure that has some kind of downward trend to it, and it's so consistent and persistent, and it just goes down and down and down, we don't want to be in this stock. This is a not good selection for us, one way or another. So I would definitely look for the stocks that are in perpetual downtrend and try to avoid those, because these are the stocks. This is how the stock looks before it starts to be withdrawn before the for the markets.
罗蒙老师说的是这样，一般来说，即将退市的股票啊，如果你要看到一种股票它一直下跌，而且跌得很厉害的话，一直在这下降通道之内，它基本上来说就会避免这种股票，它不会碰这种股票。
Some structures could be different, and some stocks are going to be so illiquid. Nobody would want to trade in them. So sometimes stocks, at least in the US markets, could be withdrawn for that reason or for other reasons. And usually the technical analysis picture in these stocks is going to be really dismal. So I would just try to participate only in the stocks that are actually being sponsored by institutional presence and that have some kind of movement.
这类股票的特点，除了这个一直在下降通道，然后一蹶不振以外，有的时候呢，这种股票就是说它的成交量非常非常低，没有人想买，根本就没有人想买。所以说这种股票，这种没有人想买的股票，有时候在美国也会退市的。所以说，对于他来讲，对于罗蒙老师来讲，他要看一下 这些机构是不是对这些股票感兴趣。如果机构没有兴趣买的话，那么这种股票就有可能有退市的危险，所以说他是不会去碰这种股票的。
Okay. Second question. If you enter the trade at phase C, how are the risk-reward ratio and win-loss ratio?
嗯，
When you trade, do you care more about risk-reward or win-loss ratio?
第二个问题是做阶段 C 的时候的风险回报比如何，或者盈亏比如何？问罗蒙老师教授，你在做的时候，你是倾向于风暴比还是盈亏比？
So when we enter in phase C, our stop loss is usually going to be below the spring, OLPS, and then our point of entry could be on the way into the trading range or on the first reaction or maybe on the first breakout of that reaction. So our risk is going to be the difference between the stop loss and the point of entry.
罗蒙老师画了一个图，比方说，如果说这块是 phase C 的话，阶段 C 的话，那么呢，我的笔为什么不工作呢 ？OK， 画笔没有工作 ，OK， 没关系。这是阶段 C 的话，那么它会把止损点放在哪儿？止损点放在，如果这是阶段 C 的那个弹簧效应，它会把止损点放在这条横线上，也就是说，这是弹簧效应的下面一点点。然后它的买入点应该是在交易区间内部，这里正在上升的，我们把它正在上升的点，或者是上升以后回调那个回调点、回调低点，或者是回调以后的这个突破点。所以说我们的风险是这一段，罗蒙老师画的黄线的这一段，是从你的买入点到你的止损点。
So it's not only in WYCKOFF methodology that we're looking for the reward to risk ratio as 3:1. And basically, we want to identify a unit of risk and then project potential units of profit, and just say that for 1 unit of risk, we're going to have at least a minimum 3 units of profit built in. That's what allows us in the long run to sustain our equity when we have our losses.
罗蒙老师说，这不只是威科夫的办法了，他说，其实这是很多交易者的这个大多数的规则。他要求是什么呢？要求是回报比风险是3:1，他把它反过来了，不是风险回报了，是回报比风险要是3:1以上才可以做这个做这个交易。那么他就画了，那你看，从我们刚才已经画到了这个风险是多高，是从我们这个买入点到止损点。那么回报呢，他要求是有3个像风险这么高的这个预期，这个股票走或者是期货走的预期有，所以说回报和风险比是3:1的时候，我们才能够做这个交易。
And there are 2 questions here actually. One of them is asking what is, right? So what's the win-loss ratio at phase C? And this is a very interesting question because in different markets, you're going to have different rate.
那么另外一个呢，就是同学问的这个，在这个盈亏比，在盈亏比啊，他说这位非常有意思的问题，因为在不同的市场里，在这个阶段 C 介入的时候，它的盈亏比是不一样的。
For instance, in the uptrending markets, you're going to have phase C that is going to give you a very good signal. And every time we have some kind of reversal in the trading range in phase C, during the uptrend, you're going to be extremely successful with this trade and with this concept.
比方说，在上升市场的时候，也就是这个市场在上升通道的时候， 你看啊，如果你要是在阶段 C 买入的话，那么它的这个盈亏比就会非常好，你赢的次数就很多。
But at the first time when the trend is going to be broken on the last trading range, your last phase C is not going to work and it's going to fail. And then in the redistribution, if you're looking for the spring and you mistakenly take this as a spring and not as a sign of weakness, then you're going to fail as well. So this is where your rate is going to go down.
那么这个盈亏比的什么时候这个比率开始降低呢？也就是说，从这个市场转势的时候，第一次转势以后，如果你要误把这个叫做弱势信号当成是弹簧效应的话，那么你看它拉起来以后立刻就开始下跌了，所以说这里有可能是输掉了，盈亏比变成亏了。然后呢，在再派发的交易区间，罗蒙老师画的是再派发的交易区间的时候，每一次都有可能出现一个弱势信号。如果你把每一次的弱势信号当成是弹簧效应的阶段 C 来再做多的话，那么每次都有可能失败，除非是你做超短线。
And then the second question here is, what do I care about? You know, these two, the risk reward and win to loss ratio. I'm really looking to increase as much as possible the reward to risk ratio, because in this case, if let's say you have a ratio of, let's say, 10 to 1, imagine that each time you trade, you could either lose 1 unit of risk or you could win 10 units of profit.
然后回到
So even with the win, go ahead, man.
罗蒙老师回答刚才那个问题，就是说你更倾向于风险回报比呢，还是盈亏比？罗蒙老师画了一个2比2，也就是说回报比风险那个比的时候，他说他非常重视这个报酬和风险比。他说他希望这个报酬和风险比越大越好，也就是说报酬越多越好。那么大家想一想，如果这个报酬是10，这个盈利和亏损比盈利和风险比是10的话，那么你只是有1分的风险，将会有10分的回报。
So let's assume that our win to loss rate is 50%, and we are making an assumption right here. So then we would be thinking that half of the times, 5 times, we are winning 10 units of reward, and then 5 of the times we are actually losing 1 unit of risk. So we are going to be winning 45 units of reward. That's our profit if we are doing the trades in a specific sequence, and that's what we need to understand as well.
他说，如果你的这个回报和风险比是10比1的话，那么想象一下，即使你的盈亏比是1比1，也就是说赢一次亏一次，赢一次亏一次，那么每次的时候呢，比方说如果你做10次的话，那么也就是说你的盈利的时候将是5次乘以10，因为刚才咱们说了，这个盈利和亏损这个盈利和 盈利和风险比是10比1，那么这里呢，就是说如果做10次，5次是赢的，那就是5乘10。然后呢，如果你是5次亏损，也就是5乘-1，这个加起来以后还是你盈利45。当然了，这个是在什么？是按照一定程序来做的交易的话，才会出现这样。所以这个程序也非常重要。我让罗蒙老师讲释一下程序什么意思。
So this question of the sequence becomes extremely important, because you could have the losses at the beginning of your run. Let's say out of 5 losses, those losses could happen at the front of the whole sequence of trades, and then your equity goes down. And then even if you lose 5 times in a row, it's still going to be a smaller percentage. So you kind of have to remember that sequence of trades, how they occur. Either the first one is the loss, or the first one is the win. What's the second one is also going to be important.
这个程序他说很重要，就在于哪儿呢？他说，如果你要是说前5次都是亏损的话，虽然是你只亏损了1，然后乘以5，但是呢，你的总体资金下降了。
So my preference, teaching students, what's more important, I would pay more attention to the reward and risk, because if the reward to risk is a high ratio, it helps you out to stay afloat, not to be in some kind of big drawdown. You're always going to have good profits.
所以说他跟学生聊这个问题的时候，他其实更重视报酬与风险比，它是越大越好，报酬越高越好。所以如果这样的话，你可以在市场里待很长时间。
At the same time, as you start looking for trades that have that favorable reward to risk ratio, start working on your win to loss ratio, and just, win to loss ratio mostly is about analytics, how you analyze the markets. So just improve your analysis.
在你的这个回报和风险比非常高的时候，你再去强化你的盈亏比。而这个盈亏比呢，多数来说都是对市场的研究，也就是说看你怎么样研究这个市场。
All right, well, good question, thank you.
好，谢谢大家，这个问题问得很好。
Okay, next one. Will institutions accumulate commodities as they accumulate stocks? Commodities have delivery within 3 months.
第3个问题问的其实是，就是说这些机构会不会对于这种大宗商品期货的吸筹也像股票吸筹那样？因为什么？大家知道这个大宗商品的期货它有一个交割期，一般来说几个月的交割期。
So there will be 2 types of institutions, right? So CO type of institutions, somebody like Warren Buffett. Those type of institutions could actually physically accumulate some of the commodities. I remember in the early 2000s, Warren Buffett bought about 20% of actual physical silver, and he stored it in a storage, for that purpose. So imagine he bought 20% of silver and just locked it into his storage, and that 20% of gold silver was not available to anybody. So that's just one type of the CO way to control the supply of a specific commodity.
大家记住，大家还可能想起来，那个罗蒙老师以前谈机构的时候啊，谈机构有几种。比方说，第一种呢，它是市场综合人类的机构。比方说，举个例子来说，就是沃伦·巴菲，就是巴菲特。巴菲特他记得在2000年的时候，他有的时候囤积这种大宗商品期货，怎么囤积呢？他是囤积实物的。比方说，在2000年左右，他大概他所有的这个资金里面，他囤积了20%的白银。当时他是囤积的是白银的实物，而不是说那个咱们说的大宗商品的那个，就是那个交易的那个数字。他是囤积的实物，他买了白银以后，就把它放在储藏柜里，就不是说储藏柜，咱们叫做仓储，存在仓储里面。这样的话，那20%的白银是没有人可以去动的，也不用去交易的。
The second type of institutions that could be operating in this market are institutional trend followers, and they will be always concerned about the emergence of the trend, and they would be looking for liquidity to get into the position. Go ahead, Mike.
我记得这是罗蒙老师在10月5号讲的那次课的，就是2种机构的 区别。然后第二类机构呢，咱们叫什么？叫做趋势跟从机构。趋势跟从机构呢，它要看的什么？它要看，哎，这个趋势有没有建立起来。第二呢，就这个市场的这个流通量大不大，我能不能够快速的进出，很容易的进出。
So they would be more concerned about doing their rollover, and as they acquire position, let's say on the way up, and they would be rolling over, at some points of the trend, and they would be giving up that position once the trend is broken.
对于这种趋势跟从的这个机构而言，他们要看的就是这个第一，这个有没有这个趋势建立起来，趋势通道在哪里？他们买的就是从趋势建立完以后，在这个某些点位，在回调的点位，他们认为是低点的时候，然后进行买入，等到趋势结束的时候，他们卖出了。
And that should answer also question number 4. That's also about the rollovers.
这个方法呢，也就是回答了第4个问题，也就是这些机构应该是趋势跟从机构，他们是怎么去蓄积这些大宗商品期货的？因为呢，他们是每一次他们叫流转，就是到一次交割期以后就卖掉，同样重新再买回来，在新的期间期货区间里再买回来。
Okay, well, that's it today for the questions. Thank you for your questions. We really appreciate this.
谢谢大家问的问题，然后今天问题讲完，咱们再讲下面的。
Okay, and now let's talk about first instrument for today, Maltai.
然后今天呢，我们讲第一个图茅台。
And we have seen a very, very good uptrend, which usually tracks a lot of the public hands into this uptrend, especially on the run like this or a continuation of the run like that.
首先呢，在茅台的前期，我们看一段非常好的拉升，是非常喜人的拉升。尤其是在这种拉升呢，在2017年后半年和2018年的初始这一段时间，这种拉升呢，尤其是快速拉升，尤其是会吸引很多散户。
So, a couple of stopping characteristics here that we could see from the chart. The first stopping volume came right here. This was the first attempt to stop the price from moving up. There was some selling that was done into the buying of this bar.
其实大家在这个图谱中可以看到很多终止行为，比方说这个，也就是说有一些价格行为，它把这个上升的趋势给终止了，但是就像刹车一样，它并不是一次刹住，而是慢慢往前刹。罗蒙老师画了这个箭头，说你看这里面成交量非常高，这里面就含有大量的供应。
We also could see that selling come on this bar, and then on a bunch of bars right here in this area.
罗蒙老师画了第二个圈，也就是这里面呢，像这个成交量这么高，现在画的这个有带 PSY 相对应这个 PSY 的，这是属于初始供应。
So look at what's happening. We first have initial selling on the climactic bar. Then we have second time, then we have the selling. It's on the bar that diminishes in spread, but still goes up. And then the third time that they sold was already on the way down.
罗蒙老师画的第一个圈的时候
movement is synchronized.
Go ahead, Rama. Synchronized.
Synchronized where the downward effort is increasing, and it's increasing a lot, and the downward result is also increasing. So that tells us that these two actions are synced.
OK， 然后罗蒙老师画的第一个圈的时候，在这里面的时候，就是画一个 S， 然后这个箭头向上的，这是他第一次机构在卖出。卖出完以后呢，你看这里面卖出以后，这个价格稍稍停顿一下，又继续上涨。然后在中间这个小圈的时候，这是第二次卖出，大量卖出。然后到 PSY 初始供应的阶段是第3次大量卖出。在第3次大量卖出以后，这个时候呢，也就是说罗蒙老师画的这个结果，这个努力，也就是说它的供应非常大，而且结果呢，这一次的时候把价格完全的给压下来了，卖出压下价格，也就是说它的结果也非常大。这个时候呢，罗蒙老师就把它说叫做结果，努力和结果是相称了，相对应了。
So what does it tell us? This whole picture, what does it tell us? It tells us that there is some selling that is coming, and this means that we could soon stop, have some kind of change of character, and possibly even reverse the trend.
整个这一段的图形，这一段的行为，价格行为和这个成交量行为，告诉我们什么呢？就告诉我们这个有大量的卖出，这个卖出呢，阻止了价格的继续上涨。也就是说，现在就像刹车一样，它不是一次刹住。那么这次阻止住了以后呢，也就是将来很可能会立刻就出现，不久的将来会出现特性改变。这个特性改变有可能是第一，把这个价格的上涨终止了；第二个，有可能将来会市场逆转。
So think about where the selling has happened. This bar, a bunch of these bars right here. Next selling came here. We could see that from the volume signature, and it's very logical because it's in the same zone. And then the next time we had some selling, it's been here, and then a bunch of bars after that, here, here, and on the way down.
然后罗蒙老师现在画的黄的部分，它就是描黄的部分，都是属于卖出的部分。那么你看，刚才咱们讲了，在第3个地方有大量的卖出，第4个地方，罗蒙老师现在画一个箭头的地方，这个卖出，他说非常符合逻辑，因为什么呢？在它处于第3次卖出的相同价位，然后呢，到第4次卖出的时候，已经是抢购高潮后面了，这个阴线大阴线的时候出现了这个大量卖出，然后第5次、第6次一直卖出。
So look at this whole area right here and think about the result to the downside that we have here and compare that to the result that we had prior. If we compare these two results to the downside, we're seeing that the latest reaction is much, much larger, and that's what defines the stop in action of the whole uptrend.
那么大家看2个波段，第一个波段呢，就是说这个自动下跌的波段，也就是从 BC 到 A2 这个自动下跌这个波段。另外呢，就是初始供应完以后这个价格下跌的波段。也就这2个波段相比的话，那么在自动下跌波段，它比前一个调整要大得多。所以说，这里面大概我们把它叫做特性改变。
This is a very important concept, so let me explain this again. Let me repeat this again. We are comparing one reaction to another reaction, and we're seeing that the selling has increased in both cases. And in the second case, we're seeing that the downward result is increasing even more than the one that we had before. So effort is increasing and result is increasing. That's all to the downside. So that becomes bearish, or at least short term, and that also suggests that we're seeing a change of character that suggests that we're going into the trading range.
罗蒙老师说这个概念非常非常重要，所以说他再强调一遍。然后呢，大家看到在初始供应 PSY 这块，这里面有一段下跌波段，然后呢，在 BC 到 A2 这段就是自动下跌的时候，这有一个下跌波段，他把这2个下跌波段都描黄。描黄以后呢，他说在这里面相对应的，在成交量上来说，或者是说供应来说，每一个波段对应的供应都很大。然后呢，每一个波段都是一个比前期来讲都是一个非常大的下降波段，所以说这是结果也在增大，努力也在增大。大家后来他画了2个圈，这里面看努力都在增大，结果也都在增大，所以说 努力和结果都在增大，而且都是向下的时候，所以说他认为这是市场出现了弱势，至少是短期的弱势。他下了个 ST， 至少是短期的弱势。这两个努力增大，结果也向下增大的话，那么他说呢，这是上升趋势的特性改变，也就是上升趋势这个性质变了，也就是过去咱们呢就说量变到质变，这个时候是质变了。或者说这个质变造成的结果，要么是转势，要么就是形成一个 trading range，TR trading range。
So if we look at now a change of character, if we're thinking that this is a change of character, then we're thinking, well, where are we in the possible structure? So we're thinking that we're probably just at the beginning of the range, and we're thinking that we are going to be in the non-trending environment. And if this is a change of character, a true change of character, then before that we should have a buying climax, and then at the bottom of the change of character we should have an automatic reaction. And then the peak that came before is most likely a preliminary supply.
然后龙蒙老师现在把茅台的这个图谱跟他上课用的这个咱们叫什么叫结构示意图来进行一下比较。那么刚才看呢，咱们看到特性改变，也就是从 BC 到 A2 这段时间，我们叫特性改变。如果到示意图里面找，龙蒙老师也把这个两个黄线都画出来作为比较，作为类比。那么这两个都是特性改变的。特性改变以后呢，那么我们到前面看有没有初始供应？你看它在示意图里有初始供应。在咱们这个茅台图谱中有初始供应，然后自动下跌，也就是从 BC 到AR 这个大阶段，这个是自动下跌，也就是通过这一点来说，示意图来讲来说，我们看到了抢购高潮，看到了自动下跌，看到了特性改变的话，我们就预测会有一个平行的水平走的这个交易区间，或者是一段不是趋势就是非趋势交易区间。或者咱们叫盘整。
Once you entered a trading range, one of the biggest questions for you is a bias. Is it to the upside or to the downside on the way out? Another question that we're going to have is timing. That is, when is the price going to leave the trading range? And then the third question that we're going to have is going to be about the character. How would the price move in the direction of that bias?
那么我们当这个价格进入了一个交易区间的时候，我们就会问到3个问题。第一个问题，首先交易区间完以后，它的方向是什么？它是上涨呢，会继续上涨呢，还是一转身转势了，这个下跌了？第二个问题，我们要问的是时机，也就是我们什么时候才会看到它这个突破这个交易区间，什么时候这个趋势将再次开始，不管是上升趋势还是下降趋势，再次开始。第3个问题，我们问的是特性，也就是这个时候它的性质会什么样，也就是说它的突破或向上突破或向下突破，它这个时候特性是什么样，性质是什么样。
So, Chinese markets are extremely unique. And as I'm learning more and more about Chinese markets, I understand that institutions operate only at the specific point of time. So in a way, it's kind of like maybe even a little bit easier to understand, but at the same time, visually, it's a little bit difficult. So I'm gonna show you just a very simple way of how to think about the bias, how to define the bias based on the institutional volume signature.
然后咱们罗蒙老师说，咱们中国的市场呢，因为比较特别，因为它只能做多不能做空，所以说机构只在某些点位出现，所以说这个对于很多人来说比较困难，但对于他来讲，他认为是挺容易的。所以说他下面教大家一个诀窍，来看这个方向，来分析这个问题。
Look at the volume signature here, and we're seeing that the selling has come in a meaningful way. And if that's the case, then most likely your question is, who is selling? And most likely your answer is going to be institutions are selling.
罗蒙老师说，这个诀窍就在于什么呢？就在于看这个成交量和价格变化。首先呢，他画了一个大的这个圆弧，蓝色的圆弧，这里面呢成交量非常非常高，比以前要高得多，所以说他说这个是 meaningful way。然后呢，大家看到这么高的成交量以后，就会问这么一个问题：那么是这个东西是在买呢，还是在卖？那么就看这个价格的表现，才能知道它是在买在卖。然后呢，大家一般来说这么高的成交量，他要问一个谁在买，谁在卖？这么高的话，那肯定不是说肯定吧，就是很大的这个程度来说是机构在操作。
And what does this selling do? This selling is basically stops the previous trend from advancing further.
嗯。那么这个卖出的话，它造成的结果是什么呢？大家看，一开始这是股票处在一个上涨的通道内，那么这个卖出造成的结果就是这个上涨的趋势终止了。
And then once they sold, what are they going to do? They're going to do nothing. So they're going to become inactive.
卖完以后，这个机构做什么呢？他什么也没做，他卖完了，他就不活跃了。
They already sold. What else are they going to do? They don't want to participate in the stock for the time being. They have taken the profits already. So the money is going maybe somewhere else into some other assets, or they're just protecting their own assets and they're just doing practically nothing.
嗯。也就是说，在其实最重要的这一段其实就是前一段时间他在卖出，在上涨的过程中卖出，卖出完以后，最聪明的钱已经卖走了，然后呢，他就基本上他就不再管了。你想，他卖出完以后，他已经知道这个市场要下跌了，他做什么呢？他基本上来说，就会把他盈利的钱或投到其他部分，或者是就是保持这部分钱就完了，他不想再参与了。所以说，在大家看后面的成交量比前面的要显著的低得多。也就是聪明钱已经跑完了，他不再参与这个茅台的市场了。
And that's what produces the trading range. And within the trading range, you're going to have, occasional sells here and there, and they're usually going to come kind of at the same area of where the price has been sold before.
那么也就是在这个大机构卖完以后，就形成这个交易区间，也就是咱们所说的横盘调整时间。横盘调整期间，大机构已经走了，它不再参与了。但是呢，大家还会看到偶尔会出现一些小的这个卖出高量、小的高量阶段，也就是罗蒙老师画了这个黄线的这个，基本上这个卖出的点位也和过去这个比较高点的这个位置相符合，就基本上在同一个价位。会出现这些比较高量的这个成交量柱。
So you want to notice this type of selling, and just to notice that it happens at the same price level. So once the price goes up, and it's we encounter some selling, and the price follows to the downside, that still confirms some bias that is going to be to the downside because you're recognizing some of the selling that happens at the same level.
这个非常重要，就是什么呢？大家看，也就是说，其他机构，也就是机构它是不一样的，有大机构特别聪明的机构，有一些是比较反应慢的机构。那么在这个交易区间内，同一个价位，也就是在这个最高价位，却出现大量的成交量的时候，然后价格向下低，向下走了。大家知道，那么现在他们还是在卖出，也就是它这个方向，也是将来市场的方向还是向下。
And then the third area, so if this was the first one, second, then the third area right here is increasing attempts to go up. So the volume signature increases. And what we'd like to understand is what kind of result on this increase of the volume signature we have.
那么罗蒙老师把它现在编号了，也就是一开始最早的时候的大机构的卖出那一段，它编成了1。第二个呢，大机构不活跃的地方，它编成了2。那么现在呢，就是说大家看到最后这一段这一段这个时间内，它的成交量是上升的。那么上升完以后呢，大家就问了，哎，这个结果会是什么？
So we have a really good rally up to about 1/2 of the range. we would prefer that this rally to overcome and maybe overcome the resistance, but it doesn't do that. So this is a weakness by itself, just an ability just to come to one half.
那么我们看呢，从这段来时间来讲，也就是它有一段拉升，也就这个罗蒙老师画的这个蓝的箭头上啊，它有一段拉升。这段拉升从成交量和从这个价格表现来说，在初始来说大家看都不错，但是结果呢，它只拉升到了这个区间的一半多一点点，也就是罗蒙老师画了个1/2。也就是说，它这么高的成交量和这么一个波段拉升的话，它不能够拉升到前期高点。这对本身来说，它就是一个弱势的表现。
And then look at the next bar. We have the bar that increases in supply. That's number one. Secondly, this bar comes in the area where previously we also had some selling. So our level of where we are selling is gradually going down from the area where we've sold before to now the new area where the selling happens at about 1/2 of the range.
大家看罗蒙老师画了这次上升这个有蓝箭头这块上升完了以后的话，立刻有一个大的阴线，他把这个阴线也描黄了。这个阴线出现在哪儿？出现在以前在这个地方也有卖出的地方这个点位。也就是说，拉升完以后，它没有只拉升到1/2左右，不能达到前高，然后立刻就开始有卖出，大量卖出。这个卖出是什么呢？大家看第一个卖出，以前的在上面的卖出区域，很多机构已经卖完了，也就现在来说，力量已经不足以达到这个区域了，达到1/2左右又开始了卖出，这是下一层的卖出的区域开始了。
So now you have to question this, and you have to ask yourself a question. They were selling at the higher level, now they are selling at the lower level. What is the bias? The bias is probably to the downside, just because the levels of where they sold are going down, like in a stepping stone.
那个罗蒙老师画了这2个区域，就是用这个紫色的画了2个区域。那么第一个区域是在这个，你看在上面；第二个区域已经说了，这次拉升已经不能达到上面那个区域了，立刻就开始派发，又开始卖了，也就是在下面这个区域。那么这2个卖出区域在向下移动的时候，那么他问大家一个问题：那么大家现在来判断这个方向是什么呢？恐怕是下降的，也就这个方向是向下的。
Well, once we know the bias, so let's say that the bias is to the downside, then we could be thinking, okay, so where is our point of entry? And the point of entry could be the next rally that's going to fail, and that's going to have some kind of reversal bar like this. And usually we would prefer supply to increase on this bar. So that would be the last point where we want to exit for sure. And obviously we can't short. So our only task here is to recognize that the trend is done. And then during the trading range, to find the points of exit. So maybe exit here, exit on the way up here, exit on the failure. And this is the last exit before you leave this position completely.
那么大家如何操作呢？那么罗蒙老师画了。那么一开始的时候，我们看到这2个最早的拉升阶段，也就是在抢购高潮以后，我们看到，抢购高潮这么高的成交量，但是呢，这个进入了一个交易区间，这个股票不再拉升了。这个时候我们大家知道，那么前一段时间可能卖出了，那么我们就会在哪儿卖出呢？在我们自己也要跟着机构来卖出。罗蒙老师画了这几个黄点，也就是说这点有可能我们一看到，这个股票在拉升波段已经不能达到前高了，这卖出。然后在第2次的时候，在那个上冲回落的时候，达到了和前高差不多相等的位置的时候，赶快卖出。如果再不能卖出的话，到 LPSY 最后派发点这块儿，如果已经是这罗蒙老师写了一个 fail， 也就是失败，也就是这块已经不能够再达到上冲回落的那个高点了， 那么下次测试完以后跌破的时候，赶快卖出。如果还没有卖出，那么到哪儿的时候呢？就是刚才我们看到了嘛，两个卖出的水平不一样，第二个水平的时候，一冲高赶快卖出。如果再没卖出，在这个最后这个拉升小波段，不到1/2，都快到1/3左右的地方，赶快卖出。如果再没有卖出，龙蒙老师说最后一个卖出点就是什么？就这个大的阴线，这个下来的时候赶快卖出。
Well, hopefully, guys, you are not caught up in this. And, looking at what has happened, we're seeing a major sign of weakness. The price is being taken down and the volume signature is increasing. So everything is in synchronicity of the downtrend right now. And the only rallies that we could have is right to this area right here. So probably some kind of consolidating time if the markets are going to go up from here. But basically, a major sign of weakness defines, that possible downtrend that we're in.
龙老师说好，那茅台讲的就差不多了，大家已经看到了这个趋势，或者是方向变化完以后呢，龙老师画了一个通道，这就属于下降通道了。那么大家看到，在主级弱势信号出现以后，这个其实价格就开始恐怕就是大幅下跌。如果说过一段时间市场回暖的话，市场整个大势都好了，那么茅台的表现会是什么呢？它有可能茅台会到来测试冰线，也就是这个交易区间的下缘，有可能会在这里面波动一段时间。
All right. Well, if this is weak, if my Muay is weak, then let's look at the market.
刚才我们看到茅台呢比较弱势，那么看整个大势会什么样？
We're gonna look at the top 50 and we're gonna look at the broad Shanghai index.
这里呢也是一个同学要求罗蒙老师讲一讲，就是说上证50的期指和上证综指的比较，他把这两个来比较一下。
And the picture here is quite different than in Muay Thai.
这里面表现来说，其实和茅台很不一样。
So let's look first at the broad index. We have been distributing the stocks on the way down and on the way up and on the way down. And we've talked about this in our videos, so you could just revisit those if you don't remember.
罗蒙老师呢，在这段来说，以前在给咱们做的公开课里面都讲过，在2017年年底的时候，到2018年1月走进，这是1到2月这段时间呢，在整个上证综指来说，是机构在拉升的过程中有卖出，在下跌的过程中有卖出，所以说罗蒙老师把这儿画了一个蓝的这个像一个锅盖一样的地方，他说这里面是供应非常大，而且是机构的卖出。
Then we have an institutional period of inactivity, maybe until this attempt right here. And then look at this increase in volume signature, just a slight increase in volume signature over this area right here. And look how price is starting to move up in a different way. So there is some kind of change of behavior that we're seeing from the price and from the volume signature.
在2018年今年的3月份以后，在机构在拉升和下跌都卖出完以后，大家再看成交量，成交量其实是不如以前高了。首先成交量低了，第二呢，这个机构也就是机构从成交量来说它不活跃了，它就非常低，比前面来说成交量都比较低，所以说机构在这段时间内不活跃了。只有在这个罗蒙老师画的这个 FACA 这块有3条阳线的时候。这里面是有3条线，就是说这个成交量稍微高一点，以后又开始不活跃。但到最近来说，罗蒙老提醒大家注意，最近来说成交量开始上升，尤其是这前面这2天，正好有2天的成交量非常大。然后看看价格表现如何。
So as we see this change of behavior, we are starting to think about where in the structure the change of behavior comes. And it seems like it's possibly coming in phase C. We had a downsloping range where the price went down and then quickly it came back into the trading range. And then it produced some kind of test as a higher low. And then the price is trying to get out of this and trying to break out. So this is a very positive development and a positive change of character.
罗蒙老师说，刚才他把这段的价格行为形容成行为改变。他说行为改变，就这里面有可能机构的行为在做改变。所以说大家把这个对照前面的这个价格吸筹区间示意图来看，罗蒙老师画了2个趋势线。趋势线里面，这里面有一个这块出现有一个这个在这个阶段 C 的时候啊，有一个立刻向下突破这个趋势线，但向下突破完以后，立刻2条红线就跑回来了。所以说，罗蒙老师说这里有可能是弹簧效应，弹簧效应以后又回测了一下下面这个趋势线的这个下缘，这个点有可能这里面是测试。
So now that we understand that a short-term bias could be a possible bullish bias, and we're seeing how the US market is also rallying, the Chinese market is trying to pick up. We're thinking that the trade talks are becoming more favorable, and we're having a lot of news from the trade talks, that are more bullish. So we're starting to think what would be our proper selection, in this climate that is still somewhat bearish with this short-term bullish bias. What assets would we be looking at in order for us to go in and to establish initial position?
罗蒙老师说，从这一段来讲，这里面出现了一个高底，刚才说了一个弹簧效应，它的测试，然后呢，他画了一个高底，然后呢，成交量也比较大，所以说通过这一点来表现来说，他说在短期来讲，这个 ST 就短期来讲，短期的这个方向来说，我们认为这里面是强势，有可能价格会继续上涨，所以说他画了一个绿色的箭头向上。那么在整个大的这个交易通道来说呢，我们说它还没有突破这个整个的下降的通道，在这个整个的下降大的比较弱势的情况下，那么出现了短期强势，那么这个时候我们将会如何选择股票来做交易呢？这是一个问题，大家需要讨论的问题。而且与此同时呢，我们为什么说这个短期的强势？大家知道现在美国的市场也在回暖。然后呢，大家也知道，可能这个两国的首脑会谈，在这个贸易会谈也比较有成果，而且呢，很多新闻也出现了，放出了好的消息，这就有可能是短期市场上扬或者是强势的辅助信息吧。
So we are looking for the assets that are going to be stronger, and how would we be looking for those? Well, we want to find some structures that are going to look different. So when we look at the overall structure here, we're seeing higher highs, higher lows throughout. And here on the broad general market index, we're seeing lower highs and lower lows. So this is definitely a much stronger structure for the top 50.
罗蒙老师以前给咱们讲过，如果我们要选一些个股票，或者是选一些个东西来做的话，来操作的话，我们选什么？选比大势强的来做多。那么整个来说，上证综指一直在下降通道的时候，我们选哪些呢？大家看上证50，它虽然用期指来做这个例子啊，其实来说它指的是这里面的单个股票。那么这个上证50呢，代表了上证整个股票里面比较强的股票，这个最大股票的话，你看它的表现其实是底比底高，一直的顶比顶高，而在那个整个上证综指还是出现顶比顶低、底比底低的情况下，所以说上证50这些股票是比较强的。
Another thing that we are starting to notice here, again, as a confirmation, a slight increase in the institutional volume signature on the attempts to go down, which are kind of have some kind of aggression to the downside, and yet the result to the downside is diminishing. And when we see that diminution result on the increased effort, we usually would be thinking that this is short-term bullish.
那么大家看这个上证50期指的这个成交量来说，那么你看它的成交量一直在增加，成交量增加的话，如果我们看下降波段的话，我们认为这个成交量增加其实属于供应增加。那么尤其是在这段，在这两个波段相比，下降波段、调整波段来比较的话，那么成交量一直是增加的，也就是说供应是在增加的。那么我们看供应的结果是什么？努力增大了，这个结果却减小了，也就是这个点啊，其实是比前面这个点升高的，是属于一个高底，也就是努力增加了，它向下的结果却减小了。所以说，我们认为这是短期的强势。
So therefore, we're thinking that the next move is possibly short-term to the upside, and we have to think, well, where could it potentially go? What is the target? And the target we probably would be thinking about in the top 50 that we're probably going to overcome the point of the resistance, the latest point of the resistance. So we need to define where is the next point where they sold before. And it seems like they were selling a lot in this area right here. So we're thinking that if the rally happens in the top 50, it's probably going to go into this target. And then for the broad general Shanghai index, we're probably looking at the previous selling at the previous points of the resistance. And we're thinking that because it's weaker, the price is probably not going to be as aggressive as it was with the top 50. So we're going to have the target a little bit lower.
那么如果说短期市场是强势的，它会拉升的话，那么我们问题要思考的问题就是，哪里是目标？那么从上证50来讲，那么他们哪里目标呢？第一个，它肯定到前面的这个阻力线，就是罗蒙老师画的这个RES 这个地方，这个阻力线，这会儿会有一定阻力，有可能会调整一下。那么另外呢，我们再往前看，就看到这个2018年2月底的时候，那条比较大的这个阴线，然后呢，大家看正好成交量也比较高，那么这个区其实是一个阻力区。罗蒙老师说，如果价格会继续拉升的话，这个短期强势拉升的话，有可能这里是目标。然后呢，再看上证综指，上证综指来说，这比上证50比较弱，那么它可能会拉升的目标没有那么大。那么首先前几个高点肯定是阻力点，有可能到这里都会有盘整啊，都有获利回吐啊这些现象。然后呢，它的目标来说，罗蒙老师也把它定义为就是这次跳空下跌这个区间有可能是它的目标拉升的目标。
All right, well, that's it for the markets. That's our market outlook. Now let's look at the last chart that we have, and that's in nickel.
那么整个市场就谈到这儿，然后我们现在看一个期货，就是沪镍。
And here with nickel, we're not going to spend a lot of time analyzing it. I think the main message here is that we have been in the uptrend, and now we are in the downtrend. And we don't have specific, areas here to talk a lot about this. So I would just be thinking that on the diminishing volume signature, we are having less of the progress right here. So that's just some kind of attempt to go up. So we just need to see this as a confirmation. If this happens, then we could talk about the continuation. If it doesn't happen, then we're just continuing with the downtrend.
罗蒙老师说，这个沪镍其实从周线和日线上来看，他不愿意谈太多，因为什么呢？因为从周线上来说，大家看到以前是上升趋势，这个上升通道，然后现在呢趋势改变，开始变成下降，而到这儿来讲，日线图上来讲，最近一段时间其实成交量减低，在这种情况下呢，有可能有两种情况。那么第一呢，就有可能它是在这个支撑位开始反转，那么它如果反转的话，我们要看它会不会突破整个这个下降通道。如果突破下降通道了，以后呢再往上一点， 然后再进行盘整，再出现一个交易区间的话，那么我们再看，它有没有可能继续往上拉升。如果也有另外一种情况呢，就是在这么低的成交量出现的情况下，而且这个支撑不够的情况下，有可能需求不足，这个沪镍继续向下跌也是有可能的。
All right, well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Send us your questions, watch our videos on YouTube. In 2 weeks, we're going to meet again for another review of the markets. And then in January, we're going to start the official course. Thank you for being here. And Mike, thank you for translating.
那么今天就讲到这里，感谢大家来参加我们的这个公开课，下2周以后再见，好，谢谢大家。